So I would assume for pretty much no one that the pension alone is going to be enough. There's going to be some other pieces involved, but the biggest piece is going to be how long you're going to be working and how big of a chunk the pension will be for your overall picture.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Shaun Morgan, a full-time teacher. That's right, I teach every day just like you, and personal financial coach. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life.
The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional.
I am super excited to have Emily here today. Emily is a wizard on Instagram and does all sorts of amazing posts there about educator finances. She's a financial planner for educators and a former high school engineering teacher. She lives in New York City and spent over a decade teaching in New York and California and Micronesia, Thailand, and Italy. It's a lot of places in a decade. And she runs the @TeacherFinancialPlanner account on IG, where she posts about pensions, the 403Bs, and financial goal planning for educators. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Shaun.
So I'm a little blown away by all the places that you taught in a decade. I mean, I've taught in a few different states, but you taught in a few different countries in a decade. So can you tell me a bit about your background in education?
Yeah, I bounced around quite a bit when I was teaching in my 20s. It kind of started out because I didn't plan to be a teacher initially. I actually studied engineering in college and worked in tech briefly. And then I actually got a volunteer teaching job on a remote island in Micronesia in my early 20s. So I moved out there for a year, taught 12th grade English, had a great time. And then eventually, when I moved back to New York City, I realized I wanted to make a career change permanently. So I left tech and ended up getting my teaching license and taught in New York City public schools for the next 3 years, mostly teaching math and engineering. And then I took a job at an international school in Bangkok, Thailand, and taught middle school math and technology. Worked there for a little bit, moved back to New York City, taught in a charter school, got a job in California teaching a whole bunch of technology classes. And then eventually made my way back to New York City again, where I spent the last 4 years teaching in public schools here, and just recently left the classroom this summer to be a financial planner full time for teachers.
Wow, just what prompts you to jump around that much? Just excitement or opportunity? What got you there?
I think a combination of both. I really love traveling, and I especially love being able to live elsewhere for a while. I think it just allows you to, get to know the culture a lot more, experience some places that are a little bit more off the beaten path. And some of these opportunities I went in search of, and some found me. So it was really nice to be able to bounce around a bit, but I moved back to New York for my now husband. So I think we are pretty settled here for at least the medium term.
All right, no more hopping around. Well, I think, even more exciting than hopping around, though, is that you are, doing financial planning, specifically focusing on educators, because, educators have very, very specific, rules and opportunities that are available to them as we are trying to, prepare ourselves for retirement. And specifically, I wanted to talk to you today about pensions, because pensions are way complex, right? They are just some of the most biggest headaches trying to read through the pension documents, regardless of the state you're in. And we'll get into that nuance here in a little bit, but just can you give a brief overview of how teacher pensions typically work? Typically because your state may vary, and why they're essential for educators.
Yeah, I think pensions can be quite confusing to a lot of teachers. A lot of educators know, oh, if I work long enough, I'll be getting this pension in retirement, but they're not really given a lot of education around how they're calculated or how they work. So that's the tricky part. And that's a lot of what I try to teach on my Instagram account. But essentially, for most states, pensions work that teachers pay in a little percentage of their earnings every paycheck. And then once they retire, they get a benefit that's calculated for them, usually based on their ending salary times the numbers of years that they have worked, times a certain pension factor that's determined by the state. So for most states, it's somewhere between like 1.5% up to like 2.5% per year, essentially. Um, so they are a big help for educators' retirement, especially if you are an educator for 30 or more years. But what I actually think is most essential to understand is that pension is really based on how long you've worked in that state. So if you've only worked 5 to 10 years in public schools in your state, the pension is only going to provide a pretty small amount of your retirement income. And it's not until you stay those 30 or more years that's really going to provide that big benefit that people often talk about. And I think that's a pretty big misconception. It's just that pensions are always big, but it really depends on your years of service.
Yeah, I worked for 2 years in Colorado, and I was talking to the pension provider, and I was thinking about rolling the money in from that into something else, and they said, well, you qualify for like $200 a month, when you retire 30 years from now or whatever. I'm like, $200 to $200. I guess I'll keep it there, but it's not a huge amount of money because I didn't work there very long. And then other states have vesting periods and things like that, so you need to really keep an eye on that, because how long you work there definitely matters. And speaking of vesting periods, why do vesting periods matter? How does it work? And what options do teachers have if they've moved to different states or school districts?
Yeah, absolutely. Vesting periods, they are basically the years that are required for you to qualify for a pension. And these also vary state by state, but most states require somewhere between 3 to 10 years of service before you qualify for that pension in retirement. So, for example, in New York, we have a 5-year vesting period. So if you only work 4 years in New York public schools, you're not going to get a pension in retirement, but the state will refund the money that you've paid into the pension system. So it's pretty similar for most states. It's just how many years are required. So if you have vested in your pension and you move to another state, you either have to like leave your old pension there, or some states, a few of them, will allow you to buy back that time if you do move. So it kind of just depends on where you're going and what the options are.
Yeah, it's one of those things that they've probably mentioned it in that HR quick rundown of your pension for 30 minutes the first day you were hired, the vesting period, but it's not what you're thinking about when you first get hired. So it's really important to look into what the vesting is in your state. If you're considering moving and it's 1 year before you vest, maybe hold off a year so you don't miss out on that vesting opportunity, because vesting versus not vesting can be a large difference on the payout, or any payout at all.
I mean, I actually think that the decision sometimes comes down to not wanting to vest for some teachers. But I often run the math for folks who are right on the brink of vesting or not. For example, I worked about 7 years in New York City public schools when I left. And if I took the money out of the pension system and invested it on my own, I was actually on track to come out ahead of what my pension was projected to be in retirement. So a lot of times people are sticking it out just so that they can vest, but that's not always in their financial best interest. So before anyone makes a decision on that, I always tell them it's so important for you to run the numbers and know what you're on track for.
That is a good point. See, not every state is as nice as New York. Some of them don't give you your money back if you don't invest as well. So it's important to know your state. That's going to be the theme today is know your state, because your state is going to do what your state's going to do, and there's not much you can do about it. So there's a lot of concern out there about the safety of pensions. I mean, people are talking about Social Security going under and it's the end of the world, which it's not, but that's a different side conversation. What about pensions? Are pensions going to just disappear, poof, gone one day? And if they are more safe or less safe, how do we figure that out? What do we look for? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this one is really tough because states vary so much with their pension provisions. At least in New York, there are a lot of protections in place for public pensions. They are guaranteed by law in the state. So if you are entitled to a pension, it says how much you're going to get. The state is legally required to pay that to you somehow, like they need to make it work. In other states, that's not enshrined in law. So I think another piece to look at is just how fully funded the pension is in your state. So if it's dramatically underfunded, that is something to, be concerned about.
Yeah, there's lots of resources you can look into to figure out if your state is underfunded or not. And I don't have them off the top of my head, but I will post a link to some resources on the show notes for this episode on teachermoneyshow.com/podcast. You can find the show notes for any episode of this show there, teachermoneyshow.com/podcast. And I'll put some resources to help you figure out whether or not your state is currently underfunded. So you were talking about the difference between investing your own money and having a pension, and how investing your own money actually was going to be better than the pension in the case of not vesting versus vesting. Is a pension going to be enough for a teacher to have a comfortable retirement? And how can they figure that out if it is or not? Because I mean, it obviously varies by teacher and by state and so forth. And if they're not going to have enough for a comfortable retirement with their pension, well, what should they do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think no matter what, every educator needs to be investing on their own for retirement in case anything happens. But like you mentioned, it really just varies dramatically from state to state, and also how long a teacher works in public service. So if someone is working 30 or more years, the pension is going to provide pretty well for you for retirement. If you only work for 10 years, you're going to be doing a lot of the work on your own to be saving up for retirement. But another big piece is also, does your state pay into Social Security or not? There are about a dozen states where public school teachers don't pay into Social Security, so they don't receive it in retirement. So it's kind of looking at all three of these pieces, like what's your pension on track to be? Are you going to be getting Social Security or not? And what's that projected to be? And then whatever is left over needs to be coming from your investments. So I would assume for pretty much no one that the pension alone is going to be enough. There's going to be some other pieces involved, but the biggest piece is going to be how long you're going to be working and how big of a chunk the pension will be for your overall picture.
I like to say that if you started teaching 30 years ago, then the pension is probably enough. But if you're starting now, then with the new tiers and the ways they're cutting back on the pension, then you definitely need to be looking out more for yourself on that. So if you're realizing that you don't have quite enough, you don't have Social Security coming because you're not paying into it, or as a side note, I've recently learned that if you do pay into it some, but you pay into your pension some, they could not cancel each other out, but you could lose some of the benefit that you're expected to get. So make sure you're looking into that. It's called the windfall elimination provision. So just be aware of that. Look into that, research that. We have another episode coming out where we're going to talk about that a bit more as well.
Mhm.
So look out for that one. But if you're worried that your pension is not going to be enough, what do you invest in instead? How do you get the funds that you're going to need? Do you just drop it in a bank account? Do you but put it in Bitcoin? Do you bet it all in black? Or where do you go? Obviously, I'm joking, but where do you go to invest that money to be able to have that comfortable retirement?
Yeah, there are a bunch of retirement investment accounts that educators can use, some of which are through your employer, some are individual. They commonly say you can't save yourself enough money for retirement. So you're not going to be putting that money away in a bank account. You also don't want to take on too much risk for your retirement as well. So you're not going to be putting that money in cryptocurrency. So you want something that's going to get enough investment returns to help you meet your retirement goals, but not so risky that you could, theoretically lose it all. The retirement accounts available for teachers are generally kind of that sweet spot in the middle. So most school districts offer a 403b and or a 457b account. So that's money that will be taken out automatically from your paycheck. You can choose how to invest it. The important thing, though, if you choose one of those two accounts, is just to make sure that the vendor you're using is a low fee vendor. Because, for example, for 403bs in a district might offer 10 different 403b providers. You have to evaluate that list and figure out of those 10 providers, which one is my best option. So you want to choose something that's lower cost. Outside of 403bs and 457bs, a lot of educators also use IRAs or individual retirement accounts. They're much smaller accounts. Like the maximum you can put in there is, I believe the limit for next year, 2024, is 7,000 per year. So that's something you would set up on your own and potentially set up a auto transfer from your bank account to invest, let's say $200 a month into that account over the course of the year. So it's just hoping that, you get this pension, potentially you get Social Security. And then the last piece is that your investments have grown enough from when you start investing up until the time that you stop working, that you can withdraw additional money each year to supplement your retirement income when you're no longer working.
Yeah, that's a great point about double checking all the vendors. The fees can range from like 0.016% to 2%, which you might be like, well, 2%, so what? But 2% on $1 million is a lot of money. It's not just some chump change there. It's a lot of money. So you need to make sure that you're keeping those fees as low as possible. I always say that under 1% is the goal. As far under 1% as you can get, even better. But just make sure you're looking at those options and choosing the right one. Have you had any experience with the people in the lunchroom who are trying to get you into a 403b? What's your experience with those advisors?
Yeah, so actually, New York City is unique from every other district in the country where we do not have outside vendors coming in to pitch us on their 403bs or 457bs. Because New York City is such a large district, it actually runs its own 403b, and there's a city-run 457b for all city employees. So for New York City, the city-run 403b is automatically low fee and has pretty good investment options. So that's pretty much set. But when I work with folks outside New York City, this is a huge problem. Like I talk with so many folks who, started teaching in their early to mid 20s. Someone knocked on their door early in their first year and said, "Hey, have you signed up for retirement? I have a great account for you." And those, I always tell people, the people who visit your school to help you, quote unquote, with retirement accounts, those are the ones that have the high fees because those salespeople are motivated to come in and get you to sign up with them. Because that's how they're making their commissions. So it's always the folks who are teaching those classes during lunch, who are knocking on your doors. Those are the ones to avoid.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag. As much as you think, oh, they're so friendly, they brought donuts, right? The only reason they can afford to bring you donuts is because they're charging you really high fees, and they'll tell you, oh, it's free financial advice. It's you don't pay for it up front, but you're paying for it with your high fees. So just be aware of that. The salesman coming to your classroom to get you into a plan is generally going to be the high fee one, and they can be really sneaky, right? I got a call on my personal cell phone, which I have no idea
Weird.
how they got my personal cell phone number from someone who was a vendor for my school. And they're like, oh, have you signed up yet? I'm like, I never gave you my number, and I know this company, and I'm not going to say any names, but they were recently sued. And they he was trying to like, so I'm trying to help you out, get you a 403. I'm like, no, you were trying to steal my money. Like your company is awful, and I told him that straight up because it is it's the worst company in my opinion.
I know exactly the one you're talking about.
And they're sending emails to my personal email too. I'm like, not sure where you got my personal email from. So but they always put like, oh, and your school, and they put in my school district, and they make it sound like they are affiliated with your school district. They just happen to be on the vendor list. And the way to get on a vendor list for a school district is literally they fill out a form saying we have an option, and the school district says okay. Right? There's no vetting going on, anything like that. It's the biggest problem with 403Bs is the lack of regulation on it for the vendors. So just please be careful. And if they claim that they're affiliated with the school, it just means they happen to be on the vendor list. That doesn't mean that they have your best interest at heart.
I 100% agree. Those free donuts end up being the most expensive donut that you will ever eat.
The most expensive donut you will ever eat. I love it. It's a great way to think about it. So we have a low fee account, right? We determined that that's the right choice. We also have a pension. You can do things to maximize a pension, right? There are like, buying years of your pension. There's, of course, putting in more years of service. There's trying to increase your base salary so that way your end year salary is going to be higher because that influences your pension. And then there's your other retirement accounts. When should a teacher focus on, maybe it's trying to build up their pension or trying to build up their retirement accounts? What are some ways to think about like which they should prioritize?
I mean, I would say there's not a ton that you can do to maximize your pension necessarily. Like it is just a straight calculation based on your salary and your years of service. So like the most you can do is really work longer. And regardless, I always tell folks, get to the maximum salary on your salary schedule as quickly as possible. So if that means, taking a couple extra master's classes to increase the salary, do that early, like not necessarily for the pension, but just to bring home more money now. So I really think the focus is on investing in your retirement accounts and building that habit early. So especially when you're first starting out in teaching, your salary is usually pretty low because you're, bottom of the salary schedule. But if you can just set up 2% contributions to your 403B or 457B, just getting used to that amount and potentially increasing it 1% each time you get a salary increase, that really snowballs over time. And just those small increases, you won't even feel them coming out of your take home pay. So it's just an easy way to build wealth without, too much effort, really.
Yeah, start with 2%. I like that. That's even lower than the number I usually give. But anything, starting with anything, just building that muscle is better than being like, oh, I'll do it later.
Yes.
Later is never going to come, right? It's never going to happen. If you think I'll do it when I have enough money, when I have more money, you'll never feel like you have enough money. You need to get that money safely into a retirement account before you have a chance to touch it. I like to have it done like when your salary resets every year. That month that it's going to reset is the month that you need to make that adjustment, that extra 1%. So that way you never even see the bigger number. You never miss it, and that's just the easiest way to do it over time.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so we're wrapping up now. We've had a fantastic conversation about pensions. I've really enjoyed your insights here. You're a financial coach, a financial planner for teachers. How can you help teachers? How are you not going to give them an expensive donut?
Yeah, so I'm winding down on my financial coaching sessions now and transitioning into ongoing financial planning. But essentially, people pay me upfront rather than like an ongoing percentage of their, retirement accounts. So that's how I earn a living, essentially. But I help people get everything set up so that they really can maximize their money in the long run. So making sure that they are in a low fee 403(b) or 457(b), making sure they're choosing the right investment accounts, making sure they're saving for retirement, but also balancing that with their short and medium term goals, making sure that they have chosen the right insurance to keep everything protected between now and retirement, and then retirement and beyond. So just making sure the plan is set up and maintained.
I love that. That's so important. I love that you have just the fee only system going, because if you think about it, people say, oh, I don't want to, pay up front. I don't want to, say pay $200. I'm not saying that's what your fee is, but say it's $200. Like that sounds like a lot of money to get financial advice. But would you rather pay $200 once to get on the right track, or $20 for 30 years, right? Every year for 30 years. And $20 a year for 30 years is a low amount that you're going to be paying these high fees. You're going to pay more money for the free financial advice over the course of your retirement than you will paying upfront to a financial advisor. So if you need some help with setting up a financial plan, reach out to Emily. She'll be able to help you out with a strong focus on teachers. She's been there. She's been in the trenches. She can commiserate with you for a minute if you need that and help you with your financial plan. All right, Emily, what is your number one tip for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
Honestly, I think it's just sitting down and thinking about what you want your life to look like and identifying your longer term and medium term goals and figuring out how your money can align to reach those. So figuring out how much you need to be putting away per month to hit your retirement goals. Once you have that plan in place, if you're thinking about saving for a home or planning ahead to a vacation next year, setting things up so you're putting it away piece by piece a little bit over time, it just makes things a lot less stressful, and the money will be there by the time that you need it.
That's great. Having a timeline for your goal. Like, I'm going to retire at this time. I'm going to buy a home at this time. And then, taking those steps to get there turns that someday into today. That's the only way that you're going to be able to achieve those goals. If you don't have that goal in mind, and how you're going to get there, that plan in place, you'll never do it. But if you have that plan in place, you'll get it done over time. I love it. If a teacher wants to work with you as a financial planner, send you a message of some kind, or just be in contact with you, where can teachers get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm rebooting my website. So the best place to find me in the meantime is just Teacher Financial Planner on Instagram.
All right. At Teacher Financial Planner on Instagram. Reach out to Emily with all of the wonderful questions. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
If you'd like to come on the podcast for coaching, to share an expert opinion, or just to talk about a topic you think is relevant, I'd love to talk to you. Just fill out the form at teachermoneyshow.com/guest. I look forward to talking with you.